Hello Booktube, it is James, back with another video. You may see doffed upon my head is a cap, a discussion cap. Not the discussion hat because it's gone missing somewhere, I don't really know. But we're going to do a discussion today because it's been quite a long time since I've done a proper discussion or really a video of any sort, but I do have plans in the pipeline for that, so do stay tuned if you have been. Thanks for that. Right, so today's discussion is going to be about critical reading, or as I like to call it, reading critically. This is in response to a sort of little flurry of videos that have been coming out recently. The one that drew my attention to it was from Steve Donoghue. I will link that below in the description. He was replying to Mercy from Mercy's Bookish Musings, and there was another video by Tall Tales, I think, that discussed the same issues. Now, my take on this, I had a little chat with Steve in his comment section about it, but I thought I'd make my own video because I'm starved for content and I've got no shame. So we're going to do a video now discussing that. So I think let's start with the argument that's presented. I've watched the videos that Steve was talking about, and I think I've realised where the snag is, and I'm going to explain it now. So basically the argument is, it was started off in Mercy's video where she discussed falling out of love with reading. She thought she maybe wasn't liking books and reading as much as she used to before. And this idea that she brought up was that she was being a more critical reader. What she meant by that, and what other booktubers have meant by this, if I'm understanding correctly, if I'm not, feel free to correct me in the comments. But what I'm understanding by this is they're talking about books and pointing out the flaws in them. They are criticising books more. That is, for me, a very different thing than critical reading, but we will go into that a bit more later. So the argument here is that now that these people have been growing as readers, they're reading more books and things, they're becoming more aware of the flaws in books, and they therefore feel like they're enjoying them less and rating them lower than they would. Mercy talked a lot about feeling like she was maybe being too harsh on books. For that particular argument, it's hard to say because it's a subjective thing. Opinion is always going to be subjective. The essence of it, though, is I guess it's discussing is being critical of books is criticising a book for something that you feel it's done wrong. Is that bad because the author's put a lot of work into it and so on and so on? And the answer to that is no. It doesn't matter if someone's put their heart and soul into a work. If it's not very good, it's just not very good. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you love books less because you're not showering them all with praise all the time. It just means that you've grown as a reader. You've identified things that you do and don't like about literature, and you're reacting to that in a natural way. I actually think that's a very positive step. I watched another video from last year by Wolfshot Publishing, who was saying that it's really good to be reading critically. That's the term he used. He said it's good to be reading critically because that's how, you need to have sort of standards with the books that you're reading, and you're when you're putting criticism onto a book, you're sort of elevating, like you're being honest about it basically. And so he's saying that that's a good thing. I agree that reading critically is a good thing. I disagree on what reading critically actually means, and I think this is where people are getting a little bit muddled. In Steve's video, he was saying, oh my god, like people are suggesting that reading critically is bad, and he didn't understand why. Because he thinks it's a really good thing. And I agree with him, I think it's a really good thing. But I think that what they're talking about is not reading critically, it's criticising books. Which is where they've sort of come into a quandary. Like, do they have to be positive all the time? Do they have to be negative? And that's a very Booktube sort of issue, because I think a normal reader wouldn't really care if they're being overly harsh on a book that they don't like or something, because they're not in a position where they're reviewing it and giving that opinion to other people. So let's talk now about what I think reading critically is and why it's a good thing. For me, reading critically is very much tied to the idea of critical thinking. If you've been to a university course, you have most likely been educated about critical thinking. It's the idea of not taking things at face value and drawing questions into it and engaging with a material in a more deep way than just the surface value. So I'm going to hold up a book because why not? So this book here, Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. So how would you approach a book and read it critically? And what do you get out of that? So if you're reading a book, for example, just if you're standardly reading a book and you're not reading critically at all, what you will do is you will read the book and you will be able to do a description of how you felt about it, basically. You'll be able to say, I like that, I didn't like that. The first step to sort of critical thinking and critical reading is to say, you just have to ask yourself that question, why did I like it? Then, you know, you can go, you just basically follow that thread. The whole idea of reading critically is asking questions at every step of the way, not just about what's happening in the book, but why it's happening, who wrote it, what was the purpose of putting it there, and that gives you such a deep window into story structure and like mechanics of literature, and an appreciation of a context around a given book that really helps you engage with it as a reader. So contrary to what Mercy was saying, that reading critically is harming her enjoyment of books, I think truly reading critically can only enhance your enjoyment of books, because it's going to bring you in deeper to books and help you engage with them in a way that maybe you haven't done before. That does, however, come with a certain... It can create a certain disdain for bad literature. So, for example, if I was reading... What was a terrible book that I read recently? Okay, so I recently read a book called Aftercare Instructions, which was absolutely garbage. So basically, there's a character in there who is completely unlikable. I hated this character completely. Really, really didn't like them. And unfortunately, it was the main character. So reading at face value, at the end of the day, I could say in my review, you know, I didn't like the main character, and then leave it at that. But if you're reading critically, you can say, well, you know, why did I not like the main character? Was the author trying to make me not like the main character? Were they trying to create an unlikable character? So when you ask that question, you know, you then decide if they were trying to do that. Did they succeed? In this case, I don't think they were. I think they were trying to create a character that was very sympathetic, and unfortunately they failed. That's where you can then say the book is flawed in that way. After you've thought about it and thought about its purposes. I see it a lot of times on Booktube, people being very descriptive with their reviews rather than analytical. And I think that's something I would encourage people to move away from, because it does create it creates an incorrect perception of a book to other people if you don't explain your reasoning for certain things. So if you were to say, you know, this book is full of unlikable characters, and you didn't like it, you know, you can... Is that because, you know, you don't like characters? Is it just you personally that doesn't like characters that are unlikable? Is it because the characters are unlikable and badly written, like they weren't intentionally supposed to be unlikable? Because if an author is trying to create a book full of unlikable characters. Like Emily St. John Mandel has created a lot of books that have characters that are unlikable, and then you end up not liking them. That is not a criticism, that is praise, because they have succeeded in their job, if you see what I mean. So really, what I'm trying to put across is there is a difference between critical reading and reading critically. Reading a book just nitpicking for criticisms, I don't think is all that potentially that valuable unless you are taking that second step and then critically reading, and sort of analysing why these things are problematic, understanding what purpose they play in story structure and all of that kind of thing. So I think a lot of people now are coming around to that idea of thinking more deeply about books, and I think it's putting some people off because they've come from a space where they've read a book and just enjoyed it at face value, not really thought too much more in depth about it, and been happy with that. And now, as they've grown as readers, they're coming around to this idea of like, not every book I read is solid gold, and they're starting to think about why, and it can be initially quite difficult and uncomfortable doing that, because, you know, you just start questioning yourself, like, am I being too nitpicky? Am I being overly critical? But that is a struggle that you're going to have to go through, and you're going to need to just force through it in a way. You know, you're just going to have to come to terms with that not every book you read is going to be good. And it's okay to not like a book. It's okay to be have a negative review of something. It doesn't mean anything bad about you. It doesn't mean anything about how you read. It's not about who you are as a reader. But it does just mean the book you read is crap. And it's okay to say that, you know. It's not a problem. As long as you are able to then justify why you thought it was bad, from a critical, thought out point of view. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, this book's fucking shit and I'll never read it again. Like, that's fine, but it's like, that's your opinion, but it's not really a justified one. But if you say, you know, this book is awful because it has plot threads that don't go anywhere, it's got pacing issues in that it's too fast or it's too slow, it rushes through things, it's got a plot that just doesn't make any sense at all, it's got characters that are intended to be really likable but they're not likable and they do a lot of nonsensical things. You know, you can start picking apart the different things in a book and analysing what makes them good and what makes them bad, and that can inform your opinion of a book, even if it's not something you enjoy. One of my stars in my star rating system of 5 stars is essentially whether or not I enjoyed the book. I have rated books 1 star and said that even though this book is completely flawed from an objective point of view, I still enjoyed it. So it's worthy of 1 star, but it's a 1 star book that I really like. And there's 5 star, but like there's 4 star books that do everything right. Like, they got great characters, great plot, great whatever. But, you know, it's just not my cup of tea. Like, for me, like, Harry Potter would, for me, be a 4 star book, because I understand that the writing's great for kids, the plot's, like, well done for children, the characters, although I think are a little bit simplistic, it's not intended for me. I can understand that J.K. Rowling has done a fantastic job in all 4 key areas that I find, but the book is not just for me, just not for me. So it gets a 4 star instead of a 5 star. That's the real difference. You know, it's okay to not like something, and it's okay to think more in depth about why that is, and it's okay to question yourself. But what's not okay is to just give up, you know, and just say, I will only read books that I personally enjoy, 5 stars every time. It's not okay to lie about your opinion and ignore flaws in a book that you've thought about and are genuine flaws. You know, if you've got something that you think is just a minor flaw, you know, mention it. Just mention it. It's not like the end of the world, you know. You don't owe anything to publishers. You don't owe anything to anyone else. Your opinion is your opinion, and here on Booktube we are here to share our opinions regardless of who's fucking bought them, to be perfectly honest. You know, it's that whole thing. I got this book in exchange for an honest review. 9 times out of 10, that review is going to be glowing. And I don't know if that's because people are now with this, I don't know if it's because people are just uncomfortable giving negative reviews, or if people are just not thinking about the books they're reading and they're not growing past that surface value. You know, I don't really know what I'm saying anymore. This video's gone on far too long, but thank you for sticking with me. If you have any thoughts to share in the comment section below about critical reading, or reading critically, or giving criticism to a book, and how you feel about that as a reviewer, as a booktuber, or even just as a normal reader, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.